The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the quiet hospital corridor as Margaret Walsh made her way toward the exit. At 62, she carried herself with the practiced dignity of someone who had weathered many storms. But tonight, that composure was cracking. Her silver hair, usually perfectly styled, hung loose around her shoulders. The navy blue coat she wore, expensive, well-tailored, couldn't hide the tremor in her hands as she clutched her purse. Behind her wire-rimmed glasses, her eyes held a weariness that went deeper than physical exhaustion. Margaret had just received news that would change everything. The doctor's words still echoed. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Walsh. The tests confirm our concerns." She moved through the hospital's main lobby, past families saying goodbyes, past the soft conversations of nurses changing shifts. Everything felt distant, muffled. As if she were moving through water, that's when she noticed him. Thomas Rivera had been mopping the same section of floor for the past few minutes, but his attention wasn't on his work. At 45, Thomas had learned to read people, a skill that came from raising two teenagers alone and working night shifts where he encountered folks at their most vulnerable moments. He noticed the way Margaret paused at the revolving door, the slight sway in her step, the pale color of her face under the harsh lobby lighting. Something wasn't right. Thomas set his mop aside and approached gently. "Ma'am, you okay there?" Margaret turned sharply, her voice cutting through the quiet lobby. "Don't follow me," she snapped, her words carrying more pain than anger. "I'm perfectly fine. Just leave me alone." But Thomas had raised a daughter who was now 22 and a son who'd just turned 18. He recognized the sound of someone trying desperately to hold themselves together. More importantly, he saw what Margaret couldn't see herself. Her purse was unzipped. Her car keys had fallen out and were lying on the polished floor behind her, catching the light from the overhead fixtures. She was walking toward the exit with no way to get home. No way to drive safely in her current state. "Mrs." He glanced at the visitor badge, still clipped to her coat. "Mrs. Walsh, your keys." Margaret stopped, turned. For a moment, confusion flickered across her features as she looked down at the empty space where her keys should have been. Thomas bent down, collected the keys, and held them out to her. "Happens to the best of us," he said quietly. "Sometimes our minds are somewhere else." Margaret stared at the keys in his weathered hand. This simple act of attention, of someone noticing, someone caring enough to pay attention, cracked something open inside her chest. She started, then stopped. Her shoulders sagged slightly. "Thank you." Thomas studied her face for a moment. In his years of night shifts, he'd learned to recognize the signs, the shock, the disconnection that came after life-changing news, the dangerous combination of distress and car keys. "Tell you what," he said, his voice carrying the gentle authority of someone who'd talked many teenagers through difficult moments. "My shift ends in about 10 minutes. How about I walk you to your car? Make sure you're all set? I don't need—" "Course not," Thomas agreed easily. "But sometimes it's nice to have company for a minute. No pressure, just one parent to another." Something in those words, "one parent to another," seemed to reach Margaret. She looked at him more carefully now, noticed the small photo tucked into his shirt pocket. A graduation picture. Noticed the wedding ring he still wore, even though the tan line suggested he'd been alone for some time. "You have children?" she asked. "Two. Grown now, mostly. My daughter Sarah just finished college. My son Michael's got one more year of high school." Thomas smiled, and the expression transformed his tired features. "They're good kids. Their mama would be proud." Would be. Cancer. 3 years ago now. Thomas said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. Just truth. "But that's life, isn't it? We keep going. We take care of each other." Margaret felt tears threatening. I don't know how to keep going, she whispered. I don't know how to tell my family. I don't know how to. Hey. Thomas's voice was gentle. One day at a time, Mrs. Walsh. Sometimes 1 hour at a time. That's all any of us can do. He gestured toward the exit. Come on, let's get you to your car. We can take our time. They walked slowly through the revolving door and into the cool evening air. Margaret's car was parked under a streetlight in the visitor section, a silver sedan, as dignified and well-maintained as its owner. Nice car, Thomas observed. You keep it in good shape. My husband always said. Margaret stopped, took a breath. He always said a car was only as reliable as the care you put into it. He passed 2 years ago. I'm sorry. They stood beside the car in comfortable silence for a moment. Around them, the evening was settling in, lights coming on in the hospital windows, the distant sound of traffic from the main road. The keys, Thomas said gently, noticing Margaret was still holding them without making any move to use them. Yes, right. Margaret unlocked the car, then turned to face him. Thomas, it is Thomas, isn't it? From your name tag. Yes, ma'am. Thomas, what you did tonight, noticing the keys, walking me out here, that was kind. Really kind. She paused. I haven't had much kindness lately. Life can get like that sometimes, Thomas agreed. But kindness is still there. Sometimes we just have to look a little harder to see it. Margaret nodded, then surprised them both by asking, Do you like your job? Working here? Thomas considered the question seriously. I like helping people, he said finally. Even if it's just mopping floors so nurses don't slip, making sure the bathrooms are clean for worried families. Sometimes. He smiled. Sometimes it's walking someone to their car when they need a friend. You're a good man, Thomas Rivera. Just doing what I can, Mrs. Walsh, just doing what I can. Margaret got into her car, started the engine, then rolled down her window. Thank you, she said again, for seeing what I needed before I even knew I needed it. Thomas nodded. Drive safe now. Take your time getting home. As Margaret drove away, Thomas walked back toward the hospital. Tomorrow was his son's baseball game. He'd promised to be there even though he'd been working all night. That was what you did. You showed up. You paid attention. You did what you could. Sometimes, he thought as he returned to finish his shift, the most important thing you could do for someone was simply to notice them, to see what they needed, to pick up their keys. 3 weeks later, Margaret returned to the hospital for her first treatment. The lobby looked different somehow, brighter, more welcoming. She made her way to the information desk and asked if Thomas Rivera was working. Night shift, the volunteer explained. He'll be in around 11. Margaret nodded. She'd wait. She had something to tell him about kindness, and about keys, and about how sometimes the smallest gestures can unlock the door to hope. After all, some people are worth waiting for. Sometimes the most profound moments of connection happen in the most ordinary places. Sometimes kindness shows up as a man in work clothes who notices fallen keys. Sometimes salvation comes not in grand gestures but in the simple act of being seen.